Hello, my name is Sarah Coderre, and I am a lawyer at River Law, which is an employment, labor, and human rights law boutique firm here in Calgary, Alberta. Today, I'm answering the question of, do I have to look for work after my employment has been terminated? The answer is yes. Well, yes, to an extent. So to be clear, when an employee has been terminated from their employment and the employee takes the position that they've been wrongfully dismissed, meaning they were terminated from their employment and the employer says that there was just cause for the termination, but the employee disputes that, or the employer provided the employee with a severance package or some notice of termination, but the notice or the severance isn't adequate when you think about what the employee is actually entitled to receive under the common law, then yes, in a situation like that, an employee typically is required to look for another job in order to try to mitigate or minimize their losses that flow from the wrongful dismissal. Looking for alternate employment, however, doesn't mean that you have to run out and get a new job. Self-employment can be and oftentimes has been viewed by courts as an appropriate alternative to finding reemployment with another employer. Whether or not self-employment, however, is something that would be viewed as a reasonable step to take to mitigate your losses after you've been wrongfully dismissed is going to depend on your circumstances. So if you are using skills and knowledge that you previously had to start up a new business, so say, for example, you were an engineer and you decided that rather than going to work for someone else, you decided to start your own consulting company, that would be a reasonable thing to do to try to mitigate or minimize your losses. However, if you decide that you're going to start a business in a completely different area where you have no knowledge, you have no skills, you have no connections, you have no expertise whatsoever, there are going to be a lot of questions asked as to why you decided to do that as opposed to find reemployment with the skills that you have. So for example, if you were an engineer and you were wrongfully dismissed from your employment and you decide that you want to become a baker and run a home baking business, but you've never baked a day in your life before and your family can't eat anything that you've ever baked for them, the courts would look at that and have a lot of questions as to why you decide to do that, especially because with a new business, oftentimes there is a ramp up period where you are getting supplies, you're spending capital on establishing the business, bringing in some income, pay your expenses, and then pay yourself out of the profits. So the steps that somebody needs to take to mitigate their losses after they've been wrongfully dismissed needs to be reasonable under all the circumstances. In many cases, the reasonable thing to do will be to look for another job somewhere else. But on the other hand, it may also be reasonable for somebody to pursue a path of self-employment. And again, if that's using skills and knowledge and expertise that you currently have, that's wonderful. It may also be the case that you had sort of a second side hustle in addition to your full-time job, and that now that you've been terminated from your employment, you've decided to really put all your time and energy into that. Again, that's something that would be viewed as being reasonable under the circumstances. The main reason, though, why you're required to look for work or find some other means of supporting yourself after you have been wrongfully dismissed from your employment is twofold. The first reason being that for public policy reasons, if you have skills, if you have abilities, if you've got marketable knowledge, we would as a society like you to contribute that to society so we can all benefit from that. And if it prevents you from having to go on social assistance or claiming EI, all the better. The other reason here too is that ultimately, at the end of the day, when you've been wrongfully dismissed from your employment, an employment lawyer will assist you in coming up with a reasonable notice period for that you should have been provided at the time of termination that then is going to correspond to the damages you're entitled to. The reasonable notice period is going to be based off of case law that your employment lawyer is able to review that has similarities to the key facts in your case. However, that case law is providing us with sort of our best estimate as to what the reasonable notice period will be. If you are not out there looking for work, we really don't know what in your actual circumstances the reasonable notice period will be, because we don't know how long it would take you to find a new job. And reasonable notice of termination is really something you're supposed to be given by an employer to help bridge the gap from your old job to your new job. And it is a very individualized assessment depending on who you are as an individual, what skills and knowledge you have, what education you have, how old you are, how long you've been in that role for, etc. And if you're not looking for work, we really don't know for you ultimately how long it is taking you to find a new job and how much notice the employer should give you. Another reason why you should be looking for work if you've been wrongfully dismissed is that if you fail to do so and your matter ends up going to a trial, the court may then, without having information about how long it would have taken you to find a job, they may reduce your notice period accordingly, particularly if an employer can show that there are many job postings at the time of your termination or shortly thereafter that you could have applied for, that you would have been a competitive applicant for, and the court will then reduce your notice period accordingly, essentially to say that we don't know what the notice period would have been for sure because you didn't take steps to actually actualize the notice period and to have that crystallize. And based on the information that the employer is providing about other employment that you could have had, now the court is going to make a preliminary assessment of the notice period without having valuable information from you about what the job market and what the job conditions were like at the time of your termination and shortly thereafter. So it's always important, if you have been wrongfully dismissed from your employment, to take reasonable steps to look for alternate work or to pursue other business opportunities that are reasonable and make sense for you based on your circumstances. Thank you.